Nice.
Hi, my name's Kellie Scott-Reed, and welcome to A Word, Roy Fagnan's interview show where I get to talk to creatives, writers, poets, filmmakers, podcasters, and those who make the magic that makes life worth living. I'm happy to welcome Aaron um, from the podcast, the incredibly humorous and surprisingly healing podcast, My Bad Poetry. He and Dave are co-hosts, and Dave is off doing the Lord's work today and will not be joining us, but he's going to be here in spirit. They met in the fall of 2012 as forced upon roommates during their first year at seminary. They soon found that they had much in common and have remained close ever since. Dave is a native of Minnesota, while Aaron is originally from Ohio, our close neighbor here where I'm from. Both are in their early 30s with spouses, children, dogs, and both are currently Lutheran pastors in the ELCA. Yet only one has a history of writing really bad poetry in high school. Welcome, Aaron. So good to sit with you today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Kelly. I'm very excited for this interview. So.
I am as well. I was fortunate enough to be a guest on your podcast,
hmm
which when I ran the whole premise by everyone, everyone said the word genius. It's genius. It is. There's something about the vulnerability of being able to come on and show the bad stuff, show the writing that you, looking back, may not be so proud of. So it was a thrill for me to be on that, and I wanted to have you on because I have some questions. I
Sure.
have some questions about this stuff. We all started our creative projects, Raw Fignon, as well as My Bad Poetry, during the pandemic.
Mhm.
Crazy coincidence. Could you give me a bit of your motivations, intentions, unexpected outcomes, and how it's made a difference in your life?
Yeah. So, like you said, this was really a pandemic project. I feel like there's that joke that every two white guys with a microphone started a podcast during the pandemic, and we were a little self conscious about that. But there was this thing that happened where all the churches in our area had to shut down. So we were getting the pastors became producers in the moment. I mean, we were running worship services over Zoom and Facebook from our homes or from empty sanctuaries. And so just getting used to this format was something that kind of sparked a thought of, hey, maybe I could do something with a friend. Dave and I, like you said in the intro, we were very close friends from seminary, and his church was about an hour away, and I just hadn't been seeing him for a while. And so we had actually tried something with the two of us doing a pastor's conversation about the text for next Sunday as like a shared Bible study. And it was kind of hit or miss. But then I was like, Dave, I want to try something else. And I had just gone home recently to visit and found this. So this is my wolf. This is my wolf journal, and it is full of the most atrocious like poems you can imagine, just scrawled like a crazy person. And so I was reading through this and just so self conscious, and yet I wanted someone to share this cringe with. And so I texted Dave kind of my thoughts, and I wanted to make sure that he knew the vision. So I had kind of written out the theme song, and I wrote out the first intro that we were using about my a deep dive into my dabblings from poetry in high school. And I sent it to him in a text, and he was on board, and we went from there. um, so as far as intentions, it was just a way of being close to a friend who I felt separated from. And then I always had in mind this idea of like kind of deconstructing some of the toxic ideas that were in these old poems, and just being able to laugh at things that I thought was good at the time, and reflecting on where growth has occurred. And then um, the unexpected outcome is after doing one season of just my poems, where the I mean, it was so similar in nature. We were just like, oh, here's another example of toxic masculinity, or here's another example of a high school thinking they're being poetic. And Dave made this offhanded comment once where it's like, I wish we had other voices kind of sharing their thoughts on bad poetry. And that just opened this door to bringing on guests. And it's been such a roller coaster. Never in a million years would I think that we would be chatting with some of the most creative artistic minds out there and just laughing together with complete strangers and like folks who are like the poet laureates of their town, or like Richard Blanco. I mean, a presidential award winner. That, I mean, no way would I have expected that 2 years ago.
That's the beautiful part, I think, of what you're doing with your podcast is there definitely feels like a laughing together aspect. And I think in the time that there was this creative idea, this kernel, that was so needed to laugh together, to laugh at ourselves. It's a time of like, you had no choice but to sit and reflect and see how you were reacting to these times. And to put forth something so awesome, and I'm so happy that you guys are around. It really is what it was wasn't my best experiences doing anything. I could not stop laughing. I think I've listened to it 1,000 times because when I'm in a bad mood, I'm walking in the woods, whatever it is, it uplifts you, and you get to see some. I am not putting myself in this category. I am not one of the poet laureates of my area at all. But bringing people in to kind of bear themselves. What I've noticed something about your podcast is your guests will put their poetry that's not so great forward, but then the poetry that they put that's great, there's the themes are still
Yes.
in. Isn't that great?
It's always so fun to see that through line. It's like there's a kernel of creative goodness in there, and something that they have been playing with for how many years they've been writing. And these poems, because we end each week with the words of a true poet, like we say, and so guests get to share poems that they're proud of, and the ones that they bring, more often than not, they lift up those themes, but they're like an example of like that they made it work. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Sorry. So,
That's growth. I like seeing the growth.
yes.
Kind of
It's
awesome.
inspirational for sure. So,
What's the most surprising thing you learned about yourself and others while reflecting on the bad poetry?
yeah. I think one of the most surprising things for me, reflecting on my own bad poetry, which is what kind of started this, was just seeing how um, I my understanding of the world has changed in the last 20 odd years from high school to here. The inherited biases that I had as to one, what was poetry, and two, like, I mean, I was from that kind of emo punk pop phase growing up in high school. And so a lot of those kind of themes of, oh, why me? And, oh, if I could just um, obsess over this girl for too long, they would eventually see the love. I mean, it was all this toxic stuff that just to see where those misgivings or those attitudes have changed or shifted or been challenged over the years. And then the other big surprising thing was both Dave and I are we I don't think either of us would genuinely call ourselves poets. Um, and yet over these past 2 years, we've had a lot of fun, like exploring poetry. Not only looking at old stuff, but writing new stuff together. And I know that Dave jokes about his hastily written poems, but he's done some really fun ones on the show that, I mean, so that's been incredibly surprising. Is the interest that has been sparked around consuming poetry, reading other people's poetry, and just a whole new world of like genres of poetry and these insights of creative writing that the guests bring on. And yeah, just surprise after surprise, I guess.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say, that you were not particularly consider yourself poets. You obviously journaled.
Yes, yeah, obviously.
Keep thinking you'll journal. And it's funny. My son, and I always bring like a little bit of a personal tidbit. My son Kevin has been journaling. Like he loved the journals that looked like super old, like you would crack it, like it was like an ancient book. And I
Yeah.
think he liked the vibe and the look of the book. And he would just draw little monsters and then write some things that are super melodramatic. And then right in between, it says the beginning of real songs. And then all of a
Ooh.
sudden, he starts songwriting. And he's a songwriter and he's a musician. And I always think of that like, there's that point you're journaling, you're writing these things, and then there's this breaking point of, oh, I'm building the muscle, I'm moving through, and I'm getting past those little drawings and those little tidbits that are slightly embarrassing
Yeah.
to real songs. So I was thinking about, I think that the growth when I was doing the show, I felt like, whoa, I really had no idea how bad I was, how wrong, how bad. Like looking back, it's like I said, it's oddly therapeutic. It's
Yeah.
oddly therapeutic when you go through. And now, because you're not a poet per se, do you have any literary um, heroes or influences?
Yeah. So I saw you asked that question in the document you provided, and I have to admit, I wish I could like say, oh, I've been inspired by like Emily Dickinson or something like that. But honestly, I I think the biggest inspiration as far as my own personal kind of writing has been song lyricists. Those and it I can't I mean, I could even say like Olivia Rodrigo, Taylor Swift, modern day poets in their songwriting, but like Joni Mitchell and Boy Genius and all these folks who they capture emotions in a way like I love songs that take you back to like your first crush or your first heartbreak. And when songwriters can do that and bring an emotion right to you, um, that's what I that's what inspires me. That's where I like to kind of dabble and play is um, just looking for that way of capturing an emotion, whether or not you're feeling it at the time. So yeah, I guess songwriters. I mean, the last couple of years, I've been raising a little a daughter who's 5 now, and so when I started kind of writing and submitting to like Rafinha, uh, I was reading like Dr. Seuss and stuff. So I think even that has that kind of lyrical feel to
Mm-hmm.
it, where you find
Mm-hmm.
those rhythms and stuff. And I like words that kind of play off each other like that. So
So I have to admit, I'm more influenced by songwriters as well,
sure.
very much so. If you haven't read the Jeff Tweedy book, How to Write One Song, I would highly recommend it. He's
Ooh,
Wilco, obviously. You're the Midwest, so you may know
yeah,
who Wilco is.
yeah.
Um, so it's one of the best books, and um, I'm very much on that wavelength, and I know what you're saying. There's something about the melody and the vote and the lyrics that meld together that hit me. They help me understand the lyrics. Sometimes
Yeah.
I read too fast. I don't fully understand the rhythm, so I don't understand the meaning. So I get exactly what you're saying about songwriters. But you're naming half of the people that you named are like, oh my gosh, Boy Genius is one of
Oh,
a family favorite of ours. We
sure.
absolutely love um, Phoebe Bridgers, obviously
Yeah,
one of the great songwriters. But definitely check out that book. I think you love
will
it.
do.
Free
Thank
plug
you.
for Jeff Tweedy. He
Yeah.
doesn't need my plugs, but um, the most helpful criticism that you've received in your life, either for writing or in general?
Yeah, I think, and I know that the phrase, I'm going to evoke this phrase, killing your darlings. I know that that's a phrase associated with some famous writer. Was it a beatnik poet? I'm not sure, but
I think so. It was like a Bukowski
or
or
Jack
uh,
Kerouac,
Jack
someone like that.
Kerouac or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
But so I heard the phrase "killing your darlings" from back when I was in seminary. We do this with the ELCA. We do an internship year where we're in a congregation, and the the two pastors in this call that I was in would gather with their intern every Monday after worship on Sunday, and we would read each other's sermons that were just given the day before. So that's a writing process in and of itself. You're doing that week in, week out, and we would critique each other as a way for the intern to learn how to write a better sermon. And Pastor Megan, who was at this call, she was really good at pointing out that like there are places that you can really love what you have written and just think that it is gold, right? But it breaks the cohesion of the message or it breaks the theme. And so to be willing to kill your darlings, to take that and maybe tuck it away for some other time, but just to be willing to revise even to the point where it kind of hurts so that you can get a more succinct, cohesive, kind of sticky message out there that will, I guess, carry more water, to use a phrase. But that has really helped me in my writing. And then I also can see that as applicable to life in general. I mean, just like saying how there have been themes and stuff that have shown up in this book that I held very dear back in high school that I no longer hold as a core belief or philosophy or view of life. And not having to nurture or keep those things alongside and being able to let those go, I think is rather helpful in life as well. So
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. As you were talking, it made me think of um, a process of just like if you have a cool line, write it down. Doesn't have to be used ever. It could just be a cool line. And Raphael for a while was doing these, like you would take your unfinished
yes.
work. And I want to start doing that again. We got so busy so fast, as you know. It was like a wildfire out of control. So we're catching up. We're catching up. But that just reminded me of that just having those lines that you're able to just put away. And maybe in their own right, they're great and can be used at another date as well. But yeah. And speaking of seminary, did you, because it is a lot of writing, a
Mm.
lot of performance.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about how you decided to become in the ministry
Sure.
and perform this incredible service for people.
Oh boy. I mean, you open a box of worms if you ask a pastor for a call story. We have to we have to rehearse that so often. It can be. I mean, I can start from day one of birth, but I think the biggest thing is that I found that at least church for me is a sense of home, and I lament that a lot of people that's not the case for their religious upbringing or the places where people can find a sense of home. But for me, and maybe it's a privilege of I mean, I'm the definition of a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I recognize that, but when the church doors were open, my family was there. And so I didn't ever think I was going to be a pastor. I actually wanted to be a choir director and pursue music in that sense. And I'm grateful that I can still be a part of choir and music to this day. But it was in college when I had to take a required religion course, and it felt like home. I loved digging deeper and getting into kind of the historical critical models of reading scripture. It's similar to what Dave and I do when we read poetry is we get to pick it apart and do some exegesis and kind of figure out what's at the core of this, or what may be interpreted from these words. And so I suppose that has always been something that I'm passionate about. And uh, just figuring out how that was a comfort for me, it led me down this path that I did not expect. So I was a religion major in college, and then I'm what they call a pipeliner, where you go straight into seminary.
Mm.
And in seminary, they at least for the ELCA, they do have a class dedicated to homiletics, which is the practice of writing and preaching a sermon. And yeah, you get into those creative writing type things where you can talk about the different types of sermons. Do you want to evoke feelings and describe senses of taste and smell of the scene that you want to play out, or do you want to do more like a thesis statement and go from there? And it's always been just I guess it's wordsmithing in a different way, but it's been a passion of mine to work on that craft of writing week in and week out. So yeah, that's a little.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you do an amazing job of like making people feel comfortable in like the most uncomfortable of situations. Criticizing someone's art, like you said, kill your darlings. The reason
Yeah.
it's called darlings is they're like your children. So
Yeah.
you're bringing them out for this criticism, quote unquote. What is your secret to the balance of having the writer's ego withstand the blows while doing this criticism?
Yeah. So I think the I guess the magic sauce that Dave and I just stumbled upon with My Bad Poetry is the name itself. I mean, to invite someone onto My Bad Poetry means that our guests don't have to bring these precious darlings. They might have been precious darlings at one point in their life, but they're in on the joke. They get to start off by saying, okay, here's the next embarrassing one. And we get to laugh together. And I love that because it allows us to, yeah, look at each other's art and each other's styles and interpretations and maybe crutches and things that we maybe rely too much on or have steered away from. But it's always coming from a place of, this I recognize as a failure. Let's pick it apart together. Let's all laugh at this in a way that isn't at all critiquing the artist or the artistry that was put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Just more the product at that time. It can be so cringe. But
Yeah.
we never take each other. We never take each other too seriously, and
Mm-hmm.
we kind of hope that rubs off. I mean, Dave starts with his joke of a poem that he's written, and yeah, we just hope that people can laugh along, and then by the end, share something that is truly special to them. So
It's funny, you do build a trust. There is definitely a trust because even though you're in on the joke, you don't technically know how it's going to feel until it comes
yeah,
back. So there's definitely a level of trust in the rapport that you build in just a few minutes with the guests. I really feel that's important. And that's what kind of makes your podcast special. I absolutely love it. So I can't say that enough. When I'm a fan, I never shut up about it. That's kind of always I'm the public address system. When I love something, I will talk about it ad nauseum till everybody's watching it. So hopefully you'll get a bunch of new people to listen. You
yeah.
should be listened to.
Oh, well,
All right.
thank you.
Now this is funny because this was originally meant to be with Dave, and there's a chemistry between the two of you, a very fun, silly, endearing chemistry. So while preparing for an interview, I like to find the right vibe for each guest before preparing the questions. I watched the movie Beetlejuice before writing my questions for the two of you. Um, is there a warm-up song for you, warm-up movie, a show, or something you partake in, an art form that you might partake in before writing something or interviewing someone?
Sure. Well, yeah, Dave and I mean, we've had this built up rapport. I mean, like you said in the intro, from our about page, we were forced upon roommates. We did not ever plan on living together. They had closed the dorm living 3 months before we were supposed to move in there, and they were like, okay, you got a roommate down in the apartments, and so we've had this rapport built up over years, and our casual conversations grew out of just like sitting together in the living room, often just kind of playing a mindless video game like Minecraft or something. We'd just be playing and just chatting about life and classwork, and just our shared love of musicals and what have you. And so I think that in and of itself is kind of a comfort zone for me. Like I said, in the pandemic, when all of us were feeling so isolated, just getting on a Zoom call with Dave was one of the highlights of my week. And so when we get ready to interview someone, oftentimes, like I'm flying in from picking up my daughter from daycare, and Dave's computer is acting slow and taking forever to catch. So we're like on with our guests the minute it goes. But for writing, I think listening to music, for me at least. I know that Dave likes to talk through things before he writes, so he's more he kind of auditory. That's his process, is to chat through things. So I don't know if music works as well for him. Although now that I say that, growing up, I mean, in that apartment together, we always had music playing. So I think music just is kind of our warm up. It doesn't have to be a specific thing, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. Yeah, the warm-up song. I remember my brother played basketball, so before a game, he had to watch "Come Fly with Me," the documentary about
Oh,
it,
sure.
every single time. I think I could recite it for his warm-up before he played a game.
That's
Um,
amazing.
it's ridiculous. So I want to thank you. I know I will say it over and over again. Please watch and listen. I keep saying watch. Listen to My Bad Poetry, and you're on Spotify and
Where
Apple.
we're everywhere you can find your podcast. I know that that's kind of a cliche phrase that you might hear, but
Covers
yeah,
everything.
it covers everything. If you listen to podcasts, you can find us. So just search for My Bad Poetry. We also have our own website, mybadpoetry.com, where you can find all of our episodes. And there, if ever you don't want to listen to just Dave and I shoot the breeze over my bad poems, there's a featured guest tab there that has sorted out just those who we've had on the show. And those are personally my favorites, because of the variety and the voices that we've had on. So mybadpoetry.com. Yeah. And then we're on X. I mean, I wish you could avoid it, but I mean, it's at My Bad Poetry, the one being typed. And then Blue Sky is at My Bad Poetry, the pod. And I mean, I'm not as good with Instagram. I don't know how to
Yeah.
translate an auditory art podcast
Yeah.
to a visual platform. So
Yeah.
sometimes on Threads, but
Yeah. Well, I know everybody will be. Listen, I'm terrible with technology. I shouldn't say that. I'm not terrible with it.
yeah.
I
You
disdain it.
host a YouTube. You host a YouTube interview. You're more advanced than we are. We would never dare and try and host a video form of our show. But
Oh, well, I appreciate you coming. This has been great, Aaron. I really appreciate you, what you do. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. And hopefully at some point we'll make Dave be a guest star on what.
we got to get him out there. He's I don't want to speak for him, but I would say he's probably a little more shy than I am. And yeah, we got
Shy, both of you,
yes.
really.
I would say,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of the joy of a podcast is that we don't have to be present with the camera. So,
Oh,
but
I'm so sorry.
no, that's okay.
I'm like,
But
oh my God.
but no, we need to get Dave back on, and we need you back on the show. I mean,
I'll do it.
we've had a couple repeat guests, and honestly every guest is welcome back on. It's been a blast. So you're more than welcome to come back on with even more of your bad poetry.
I appreciate it. I absolutely will. Watch, I'll call you tomorrow. Listen,
Yeah.
I want to be, can I just be on your show forever?
You
All
might
right.
be the first to repeat within the same season. So if you want to try and do that.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. It's been great speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And thanks for joining us for a word.